All right, let's get started. It's 6:30. We'll open up with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
in progress
to the
To the
flag
flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I would like to ask to amend the agenda to include mayor's report and council report.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion by Chad, seconded by Mike. So all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Hearing none, we'll add those two items to the agenda. We're going to move on to item number 2, which is general public comment on non-agenda matters.
Mr. Mayor, can we hold on for a sec?
Yep.
Or, check. Just give us a minute. Our mic's not working.
Did you,
Yeah, I think they can hear us now.
did you swing by to catch Caps yet?
All right, I think we're on
I
now.
saw them, but I was in the middle of meetings. By the time I came over, they were gone.
Yeah, they can hear us now. Sorry about that.
Okay, so we'll move on to item number 2, which is general public comment on non-agenda matters within the council's purview. Anyone in the audience? No? Is there anyone on the call who would like to make a public comment? Please raise your hand. Identify yourself.
Reese Kelly's raised his hand.
Mr. Mayor, are we supposed to be able to see you?
Oh, we gotta turn the video on.
No chance to, there we go. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Jim.
Reese has his hand raised.
Right, Reese has your comment? Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. To you, Mayor Tim Smith, and to the City Council, I wanted to express my concern today with troubling components of the BEI selection process, the committee process, that I believe, on one hand, reduced or eliminated opportunities for the community to provide feedback, and on the other hand, it also undermined the trust that the city is attempting to build with community members dedicated to belonging, equity, and inclusion. The first component of this is that the charge explicitly designated a 7-person committee, a committee that 8 members were appointed to at the last city council meeting. Nowhere did you provide an explanation for this change. And when I contacted city manager Dominic Cloud, he expressed that the change was for the purposes of inclusivity. My question is on these lines, it's probably somewhat rhetorical. If the number of committee members was extended from 7 to 8 in the spirit of inclusivity, then why not 9? Why was the only applicant who mentioned neurodiversity in their application not even interviewed? This person was told that there were enough applicants who lived at the city and that her candidacy was not being considered. Why was this decision made when we have non-city residents on other city boards? Criteria that was neither in the charge nor in the application. You also never provided the community with this information, just as you did not provide the community with applicant information. Why? You post applications for other boards in city council meeting packets. It took Vermont Digger to ask for the applications, for me to ask the reporter at Vermont Digger for copies of them, and for their editors to decide to make them public for anyone to have knowledge of who the applicants were for that committee. We found out from a news source after the appointments were made instead of from our city. Why? On the topic of communication, you also failed to communicate to the applicants that you would be voting on the appointments at the January City Council meeting. Why were the applicants not informed that there would be a vote and on which day that would be? Why did that not happen in advance of the vote? Furthermore, when you came into the city council meeting from executive session, you gave little to no information to the public on the selection and appointment process. You simply went straight to a vote. Why? Why are you missing these opportunities to be transparent and open and communicative with the broader city regarding things like belonging, equity, and inclusivity? Why was all of this information kept behind closed doors? From my perspective, your lack of communication, the lack of transparency regarding process, your lack of explanation for decisions made for this committee that differ from how other committees and committee selection processes operate, all of these things reduce the opportunity for community engagement and feedback. And just as importantly, they undermine the trust that we have in our city government. And I really hope that they do not undermine the ability for the BEI committee to function properly. Thank you.
Thank you, Reese. Anyone want to comment in any way?
I just wanted to say, Mr. Mayor, I don't think it's appropriate for us to debate in public comment, but I'm perfectly happy to have a conversation with any constituent about the BEI committee selection that wants to talk to me. A few have reached out.
Thank you, Michael.
I just want to reiterate that my concerns are about a lack of transparency, not about any individual city councilor's openness to having these conversations. When they are not held publicly and openly, you are not giving the community the opportunity to be aware of the decisions that are being made and why. Thank you for letting me clarify that. Clearly it was misunderstood.
Thank you, Reese. Points well taken. Dom, you good?
I think we should move forward.
All right.
Is there any other comments?
Any other public comments?
Yes, should I raise my hand?
Oh, go ahead. Just identify yourself, please.
Absolutely. This is Jeffrey Nelson once more. And greetings, everyone. Hope another month or so, I'll be meeting with everyone in person again. I just wanted to say, much echoing my predecessor's sentiments, 8 months ago, we experienced a great milestone of civic pride, honoring Juneteenth and our pride in St. Albans, and many other aspects. And even as the details of the BEI committee were being edited and finalized, there was someone that was at home just really stewing about it. And he would go on to write a letter to the newspaper, certainly perfectly within his right to do something like that. He could have attended the meetings that they're public meetings. I don't understand why someone would not think that they're invited to the public meeting. But what he chose for in his pool bag is the bullhorn. And I dare say those people that you have honored, the process by appointing to the committee, fellow committee members shouldn't have to put up with someone that's only has a bullhorn. You shouldn't have to have them spend all their time and energy convincing someone that thinks that prejudice is imaginary, that thinks that people are acting. You go to his website, he has very thinly veiled anti-Semitism. And so great, you don't want to have a discussion about what anti-Semitism is? Let's have it all out. But I think it's easier to have people that already know what the definition of anti-Semitism is, and they already know what things should be avoided. And do you really want to have someone justifying that in fact stickers were put up around town versus someone who was acting? I don't want to do that. Do you want to put your committee members through that? The mind, it just boggles the imagination. That's not a setback. That's not hobbled. That's a concrete block. That is not a start. And I hope you don't saddle the committee with that. You still got time to fix this. I'm asking you, please, that no one knows what the exact definition of good faith is anymore. No one's quite sure of the recipe, but we know when people burnt that dish. We know what it smells like, and I don't feel that someone's acting in good faith if they say they want to be part of something that they took one of the best moments in your body's history of the year, maybe. You guys worry about details that I'm not privy to all the time. Great, but that was one of the best moments of the year, and to have someone just reduce that to something that was gonna be fodder for a letter without him having even the wherewithal to attend a meeting and say his piece. I gotta say, if that's what it takes to get on a committee is to say nothing but to others publicly, it reduces the public discourse, and I hope that you act accordingly. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comments? Seeing none, we're going to move on to item number 3, adoption of revised police policies. Chief, you want to come on up?
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening, Chief. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Just a little preview to these policies. This will be the quicker part of my part tonight. These policies were all introduced last year. The only reason they're back this year is because they were originally written under one-year policies, because we wanted to get them on the books. Most of you are probably aware of the way policies normally work. Policies normally work on a 3-year term. So these have only been reintroduced to go to a 3-year term. The only changes on all of them are the dates and the address, because we have since moved to the new PD. They have gone in front of the PAB again to advise them of the same thing. The only one that is different, fair and impartial policing went from 1 year to 3 year with a change of date and address. That's the only change. The selection policy, 1 year to 3 year with the date and the address change. And also we added that we can get a hold of applicants by email. That wasn't in there before. That's the only change. Internal affairs policy, address and date, and the only thing we changed that's different is Lieutenant Ben Kuchar, who does most of our internal investigations. When this was written, he was called the ACI Lieutenant, which was administrative lieutenant. We changed it to Bureau of BCI Lieutenant, Bureau of Criminal Investigations. We just changed his title because I hated that ACI Lieutenant term. I'd never heard that before, and that was under the last chief. So those three just simply changed the date and address and that one small change. The last one, body worn camera, this is now a state policy. So this, like the use of force policy, is a state policy we had to adopt. I can't tell you this is going to be a 3-year policy. I don't know how long this one's going to be. So those 4 policies, that's really it. That's why they're in front of you. I met with the Police Advisory Board last month. They've had a chance to look at them and review them, but there's really no changes in the first 3. Body worn policy is a state policy. I believe the reason the state came out with this, just to give you a little background, the state had came out with a statute saying that every agency had to have a body worn camera. I believe by January 1st of this year. We were actually one of the first agencies to have body worn cameras many, many years ago. I think we've had them 8 years. So we are ahead of the curve on actually having cameras and a policy to go by. But a lot of agencies didn't have cameras. They since all have had to get them, but I think the state probably realized that now that they have cameras, maybe some didn't actually have a policy for the cameras. So they came out with their own policy. Ours was very similar, but we adopted the statewide policy. So when we're looking at it, I actually couldn't find any difference between our policy and this policy. I mean, they're all the same. You wear them, you have to use them when you can't use them, but there's really no difference. That's why we're here.
Where's the wording come from on this, on the body?
Where's the wording?
Yeah, who drafts this?
So they have a committee down there that does it. That comes. They ask for input from everybody. They ask for any policies that we currently have, any agencies currently had. So we actually sent ours too. But in looking at ours page for page, I asked the other lieutenants, I have 3 lieutenants to look at, and we couldn't find any real difference in ours. I think they probably look at International Chiefs of Police Association, which is where most of ours come from, because that's like the standard for CLIA policies. But Jen Morrison, who used to be the chief of UVM, then she was Ben Colchester, UVM, Burlington. She's a big part of the policy decisions that come out of the state of Vermont. So she's probably the leader. She's the one that put out the use of force policy. So that's kind of where they come from.
What's the liking of the board? Do you want to do them all at once, or?
I have one question.
What do you got?
The body worn camera
Yep.
one. Is there any possibility that someone would shut off the voice recording and still be able to do video?
No, it's one or all.
It's one or all, okay.
Yep.
That was my only question, thank
Yep.
you.
I have a quick question on the internal affairs one.
Yep.
And I wonder if there's a typo on
Could be.
the internal affairs one, page 6, where it's just above number 3, where it says, the information disclosed by the employee cannot be used against them in a criminal case. However, the investigator, a criminal investigation may be authorized. I think it should perhaps say, in the investigator's opinion or judgment, a criminal investigation may be authorized or something like that.
Are you talking the paragraph directly above number 3?
The sentence, beginning with the word if.
If after the employee, right there?
Yeah, and then the last sentence in that
after the-
paragraph. The information disclosed by the employee cannot be used against them.
The information disclosed by the
In a
employee.
criminal case, however, the investigator, a criminal investigation.
Oh, yep, you're right.
There's a missing word or something.
There is, you're absolutely right. The information disclosed by the employee, yes, cannot be used against him in a criminal case. However, the investigator can authorize, the investigator
something
can.
like that.
Yes, the investigator can authorize or can initiate a criminal investigation, can request a criminal investigation. That is correct. You are right. Good catch. But that is what that means. Yes, they can ask for, initiate, request a criminal investigation, but the information used during the internal cannot be used. It has to be regained or redetermined through the criminal investigation. Thank you. So that's been through 2 now of our reviews, 2 PAB reviews, and you caught it. So that's how you look at policies all day long. So thank you.
Mike, anything?
No.
Jim Pelkey, any questions?
You're on mute, Jim. Jim's on mute. He's talking.
Jim, you're on mute.
Sorry, I didn't know it was on mute. I'm not used to this anymore. No, I have no questions.
Okay. Anyone from the public? Questions, comments? Okay, then I would propose we approve them individually.
I move that we adopt the fair and impartial policing policy.
Second.
Motion by Chad, seconded by Jim. Any further comments? All those in favor say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Hearing none, motion passes.
I move that we adopt the body worn cameras policy.
We have a motion by Chad, seconded by Jim to adopt the body worn camera policy. Any comments, questions? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposition? Motion passes.
I move that we adopt the personnel selection policy.
Second.
We have a motion to adopt the personnel selection policy, seconded by Jim, original motion by Chad. Any further questions or comments? Hearing none, all those in favor of the personnel selection, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Hearing none, motion approved.
I move that we adopt the internal affairs policy.
We have a motion to approve the internal affairs policy. Is there a second?
I'll second, is that the one that Bob got the,
With Bob's changes, addition.
yeah, that's what I'm looking for. So I'll second that.
Okay, so we have a motion to approve the internal affairs with one minor change. Motion by Chad, seconded by Jim. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Motion passes. Chief, we'll move on to item number 4. Thank you for that, by the way. Item number 4 is taking an overlook of the data presentation from the past calendar year.
Okay, so just stop me whenever you want any more information on this stuff, because there's quite a bit of it. So I'll start with just a general stat. So preface this with last year, 2021, COVID. So COVID hurt us in a couple different ways. First of which, we didn't do a lot of proactive work. We were trying to be somewhat responsible, meaning that I didn't feel we should be spreading, or we should be reducing our likelihood of spreading COVID by doing a lot of car stops. I didn't feel it was safe for us. We had a lot of officers that got COVID themselves more than once, in fact, myself included. So I didn't think it was right that we'd be stopping cars and potentially spreading COVID from one person to the next through incidental contact. So we didn't do a lot of proactive work, and our stats show that. And coincidentally or incidentally, we didn't get a lot of calls for service last year, so compared to the year before. But in 2021, we took 9,000 calls for service, just over. 6,900 were in the city, 1,600 were in the town, but keep in mind that we lost the town June 30th. So whenever I talk about the town, we only had it for half the year. So, 9,000 calls in the city, or a total 6,900 in the city, 1,600 in the town. The rest were in Highgate. Arrests, we had 500, just over 500 total arrests, and I can break down the rest a little bit in a second, but most of them were in the city at 366, 137 in the town. Of those, majority of them were males, 256, 110 females. We only had 25 juvenile arrests. Motor vehicle work was way down from the year before, 1,292 stops. Of those, only 160 tickets were in the city, 57 in town, the rest were all warnings, which is kind of the way I was also pushing that as well. People were having a hard enough economic time during COVID with a lot of people not working or not working to the extent they were used to. So I felt that it was more important that we do an educational piece than a financial impact on people. We did 369 motor vehicle accidents. That was down, so there's no way we control motor vehicle accidents, so I do think more people are working from home. There's less traffic, or was less traffic. With 66 DUIs, 50 people were stopped for driving with no license in a criminal offense, 229 juvenile incidents, which were actually up. A lot of kids weren't in school, haven't been in school, so we're getting more calls about juvenile problems outside of school when kids are normally tied up in school. 12 death investigations, that was right on from the year before, so that didn't change, nor should it. I would think that stays consistent. 113 domestic disturbances, that was up a little bit, which I think makes sense because people were working from home, they were home more than normal. 171 larcenies, that was pretty close to normal. And 92 vandalisms, that was up. So again, some kids aren't in school. The younger generation is typically involved in the vandalisms. One thing on that real quick, we had, for the first time in 9 years, December and January, 9 years, we had no car breaks in the city. Not one. That was reported to us. Kind of an important stat that we had not one in 9 years. So we attributed that to one of the details that our lieutenant is working at night. He started it in the end of the fall, is right around beginning of winter, is right around September, so it only ran for a few months before December hit, where all of the officers on night shift were required to hit every street twice in a shift. So every street in the city, whether you know it or not, is being driven on twice in a shift with their slow blue lights on, which means that their steady blue light is on their cruiser, and they're hitting them every night, twice a shift, unless something comes up they can't. But it's pretty much happening every night, and hopefully that's coinciding with this no car breaks in 2 months. And like I said, for 9 years we ran it, and that's the first time that's ever happened. So we're starting that in day shift as well. Day shift's busier than night shift, call volume wise. So we don't know if we'll get it to it every single shift. We're gonna see if that makes a difference on calls. We're trying it, and like I said, it worked. Granted, you have winter, so it's colder. It's been very cold, so there aren't as many people out and about. But we're hoping this is a direct reflection of that initiative that he's got going where we're out. So the officers like it. It's also good to get, you see more if you're doing that. If you're doing the roads every night or streets every night, you're picking up stuff that shouldn't be there. It wasn't here last night, or whatever. And you're meeting people we have a lot of people living on the streets right now. And you're running into them, you're meeting them, you're talking to them, you're seeing what they might need for assistance, and you're letting them know that we're out there. So that was a good initiative, and we've seen some good things come out of it. So if you get any comments on that, that's why we're getting the comments, and people are liking it, a lot of people are commenting on it, but people are asking why the steady blue light. And the steady blue light, people are understanding now, so we're seeing, and people recognize what it is, because they're driving pretty slow when they're going through these areas, and we just want people to realize that's why, so people aren't, a little bit, nervous about why a car is driving slow by their house at 4 in the morning. So it's just a steady blue light. It's not rotating, flashing, it's just a steady light. So it's working good. That's it for regular stats. Unless you have any questions on that, I'll move on to the ones that.
One minor correction, Chief,
Yes.
on domestic disturbances. You got the city twice. And
Okay, so now down to the town. And
town should be on.
like I said, everything should go back up a little bit. So next one's town. Should go up a little bit for this year, I'm assuming, because people are kind of getting back to the normal swing of things. We're definitely gonna go up patrol-wise as far as proactive work. We're going to start stopping more vehicles for infractions than we have. Most of 2021, our stops were based on safety. If it wasn't a flagrant safety violation, we weren't doing a lot of car stops. We're going to start stopping for more traditional car stop issues, because we get a lot of vehicles running around here now that aren't inspected, aren't registered, and we haven't done a lot of that, and we're going to start that back up, as are the other agencies around here. So we'll see how that goes. So try to get people at least back into the realm of having safe cars and not just stopping them for speeding and such. That's our goal. So the first yearly stat I'm going to go over is the response to resistance. So response to resistance, the best description of that is anytime we put somebody into handcuffs and they don't go into handcuffs completely compliant, meaning you ask them to turn around, put the hands behind their back, and you hook the one cuff on, typically the left one first, and the right hand cuff on, and they're completely compliant, and it doesn't go that way, and they pull away, tense up, start to turn, and that becomes a response resistance. If anything like that happens, they have to report, the officer has to report it, and it counts as a stat. So again, anything beyond just clicking the handcuff, clicking the other side, anything beyond that goes to response resistance report. So 2021, we had 30 response resistance reports, which I thought, I'd be honest with you, I think when I reported this last year, I thought the number was gonna be much, much higher this year, because we have to report every single one, and our reporting requires such, it's so stringent that I really thought we were gonna be higher. The 30 reports, we had 61 officers involved, so a lot of times when response resistance and more than one officer there, it could be one or it could be six. So there were 61 officers involved in the 30 instances. So of that, 9,018 calls, there was 30 response resistances involved, so 99.67% of the time there was no issues with response resistance, and 0.33% of the time there was use of force involved. Now, of that, 12 times it was females, 18 times it was males, so 60% to 40% in response resistance. The next page is the racial data. 29 times out of 30 it was white Caucasian, 1 time it was black male. The next page is age. I guess age is all over the place, kind of what I guess you would expect. 24%, 24%, and the biggest ones. There's the under 15 years old was 4. I've got a sheet on that I can kind of explain because that caught my attention, so I thought you should know about it. The under 15 is 2 different kids, and I say kids because I consider them young, but they're juveniles. So 2 of them was one, 2 of them was another. I give you a real brief, so I looked them all up individually. So one of them, the person was actively cutting themselves with a razor blade when we were called there. So the use of force was removing that situation, getting the razor blade away from that person as they were cutting themselves. The other one, the 2 times on the same female, when we were called there, and immediately the officer was immediately assaulted by the female on site, and that was with crisis worker and NCSS already on scene. That person's been a little bit of a handful for us several times, but these 2 times resulted in the use of force. All 4 of these were minor use of forces. They were just hands-on into handcuffs, but these two individuals have been account for all 4 of our under 18 use of forces, and they are all within. Looking at the case numbers, 2 of them with the same one of the persons were within, I'm going to guess, a week. And the same thing with the other person, months apart, but the same other person where the case numbers are, I'm guessing, within 2 weeks. And so they're either having a bad time at this short span of their life, and that's the only time we dealt with either of these people in that year time frame was very short spans of each other. And just to give you an idea, so 30 use of forces for 2021, 37 use of forces for 2020.
Chief, should that be under 17?
The use of force, how we broke it up, you mean?
Yeah, it goes 18 to 20, that says under 15, should that just be?
Yeah, so there was nothing in the
16,
Yep,
17?
there was nothing, yep.
I'm glad us old people are compliant, Chief.
What's that?
As I'm glad us old people are compliant.
Yeah, we tried to we broke it up to the ages, so I did ask about that, so one of my other lieutenants wanted to put this together, why we didn't have the 16, 17, and why we didn't go over 60, because it didn't have anybody in those age groups, just so you didn't think we had somebody that was 85 and to narrow it down a little bit more.
Well, first we're law, but.
So our use of forces actually went down a little bit from last year. I'd like to say it's because of some of the de-escalation training we've gone to, and hopefully it has been, but I'd also say that if you watch some of these videos, the officers are giving people a long time, and that's good in some situations, but I also had, if you look at our injuries to officers, we've had more officers injured this year than before. So they're very patient, sometimes to their own safety. They're risking their own safety because they're letting people get away with a lot of stuff that they normally wouldn't have let it go quite that long, and it's putting themselves in some danger. But they're using some de-escalation skills, and they're learning as they go, and Sam's been a big help, and she's gotten a lot more. This was her first full year, so I think that plays into the decrease in use of force as well, and hopefully if we get another one of her, decrease even more, at least hold it steady.
What's the extent of the injuries of the officers?
What's that?
What are the extent of the injuries?
Nothing major, all small stuff. It goes from cuts and bruises, mostly bruises and sprains, and, you know, a few cuts, but mostly bruises and sprains. Nothing big. That's all we've had.
I, for one, I think that the numbers are much less than I anticipated. And
Me too.
I thought that was great.
Me too, only because we report every minor thing that I thought they'd just be higher for that reason alone. We had one thing we didn't go over. The last page tells you exactly what the resistance. We had one taser incident this year, and that was displayed but not deployed. So that was the one use of force that was, I guess, for lack of a better term, elevated, about beyond, you know, hands-on or OC, and that didn't result in a deployment, just display. So just so you're aware, if you take your taser out of the holster, that's a elevated use of force. It's a separate report form. So if you display your taser but don't use your taser, it's still a taser use. And it's a separate form.
Anyone have any questions of Chief?
Yeah, I have a couple of quick ones.
Go ahead.
Mr. Mayor. So Chief, that means that there was never an incident this past year where an officer had to pull their firearm?
Firearms were displayed 7 times.
Okay.
Yep, 7 times. That doesn't, they're displayed, not used.
Right.
So a good example of why firearms are displayed. So any felony car stop is always a displayed firearm. So that's trained right from day one. You're going to see them displayed at felony car stops, and you're going to see them displayed at building searches.
Okay.
That's usually the 2 times they're always displayed. Beyond that, unless it's a safety situation, that you're not going to see them displayed. A lot of times, felony car stops are always going to be reported because that person likely saw it. A building search, if there's nobody in there, that's not going to be reported, because unless it made a difference in the outcome of the case, meaning the person saw it and reacted differently because they saw it, then it has to be reported. But if there's an empty building, it's not going to be reported.
And I realize that there's going to be, because our service area with the contract changes, it's going to be hard to compare year over year, but would it be possible to present, you know, some of the key data as a year over year in the future presentations? Like, I'd love to see the call volume for the city, for instance, for the last 5 years, that kind of thing. So
The only reason that it's hard right now is because COVID skewed these numbers so poorly. As far as the first data I went over, yeah, it's very hard. I mean, our COVID numbers are rate in half for proactive work, and I can tell you it was our decision to slow people down. But once we get out of this COVID, it should show a trend of what we're doing proactively from year to year, or call volume year to year. But right now, we aren't putting people out there as much, and the calls, it dropped off when COVID hit, and everybody thought we'd be in trouble. We thought we'd be busier with people being home and being bored, and it actually didn't happen. But yes, I think it was easy to do before COVID, and I think it's easy to do after. I think this was just that thing in there that I can't tell you why the numbers did what they did, other than the proactivity being down, because, like I said, I didn't think it was safe for us to be potentially transmitting.
It's been a weird couple of years.
Weird couple of years, yep.
Yeah.
I have just one really quick question.
Yes.
The 50 folks that were DLS,
Yep.
are some of those that occurred, are those the same people? Don't know.
I'd have to pull that. If I answered that based on my experience, I would say that likely so, yes. My experience with people that drive without a license, whether it's criminal or civil, is they are driving because they have to drive, and they haven't had the ability to, either don't want to or haven't had the ability to get their license back. So unfortunately, they tend to be the ones that are driving the cars that are in trouble, or have some ailing problems that cause them to get stopped. So that's been a problem. Yeah, they're repeat offenders. So, and with the court system the way it is right now, they aren't even getting to court. I mean, they're backed up months, if not years. So those charges are hanging over them. So they do tend to get picked up and picked up and picked up. Yes.
So Mike, I know a few years ago, it might have just been Chittenden County, I don't know, but the state basically said.
They did it.
We did it here, basically came in and said, hey, I don't know if you plead guilty or whatever, we're trying to, because that's what we want to do, is we want to get the people legal.
Yeah.
And if you don't have a lot of money anyway, I mean, some of these are crazy expensive to try to get through, and they just said, here, take this reduced amount and get you back on the road legally. So we've done that recently here.
Yeah, I don't know if it's been done recently here. Chief may know. I mean, there have been periodic amnesties offered by the Attorney General and state's attorneys for suspended license. Yeah.
But I thought Jim Hughes was organizing one with TJ Donovan.
He probably is, because as Mr. McCarthy said, there has been a lot of attempts to get people back on their feet with that, because we're not helping them. They're not, you get in such a hole, you know, so we're not against doing that. It's nothing to do with us anyway, but the state attorneys have tried that and it has worked. So maybe after COVID, because right now they're so far behind anyway.
They did it in January, actually.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of cases were flushed in January, and I don't know if they were specific to that or what they were specific to, but.
I thought that's what I had seen. I don't remember a date, but I thought that if it hasn't happened, they were working towards a date of doing it.
Yeah, I mean, now it's happening at the discretion of the Attorney General in partnership with the state's attorneys, and it's a little ad hoc right now. There's some conversation about trying to set some state policies, so there's kind of a periodic review of driving with a suspended license, but it is one of those things, it's like debt, you know, it's a hole that you just never get out of, and then it's like, okay, we can kind of clean the slate for some people, and if they actually have motor vehicle moving violations other than the DLS, that's a thing, but if they just keep getting picked up because they have a suspended license, it's just a waste of all of the PD's time, and it's not really doing anything to help public safety. That's an ongoing conversation.
Yeah, I think the other part of that is a number of them were unable to work because of the loss of license.
Right.
Yeah.
So this helps them.
I'd rather see people get the
reemployed.
license back, because like I said, it doesn't do us any good anyway, so.
So there's a population of people that doesn't work because they're trying to actually honor the fact that their license was
There are
suspended.
those people
And then
too,
there's a
yeah.
lot of people, probably more people who are just driving with a suspended license because they don't want to lose a job and lose the income.
So next thing I have, unless you have any more comments on that,
No, that's
is the
good.
internal affairs. So I have the internal affair data, so I'll just, real quick comparison, 2020, which was prior to our much more strict internal affairs policy and most of the other policies we've written, we had 12 complaints against officers. That included all internally generated and externally generated investigations. So then 2021 came with our boatload of new policies and our much stricter policy, and we had 21 internally and externally generated investigations. So we're doing something right, and sounds kind of weird, but I think we're doing something right in that we're holding each other accountable and we're responding to every single complaint that we get about an officer. So again, total numbers 21. 13 of them were externally generated investigations, meaning that the complaint came from a citizen outside of the department. Of those 13 internally generated investigations, we have 5 categories of which they can be adjudicated. They can be not substantiated, which means this is how they're termed. There wasn't sufficient evidence to prove or disprove that this complaint happened. This finding may be used for any complaint that has gone unresolved. It can be exonerated, which means the incident did occur, but the employee's actions were justified, lawful, or proper. It can be unfounded, which means the complaint admits to false allegations, or the charges were false or not factual, or the employee just wasn't there, and we just had one of those this week. It wasn't even our agency. They can be substantiated. The allegation is supported or sufficient evidence to indicate the employee did in fact commit one or more of the alleged acts, or it's a policy failure. It means that it did happen, but it was no fault of the employee. They were acting under a policy that was valid and it was wrong. So in 2021, citizen externally generated complaints, we had 13 of them. 1 was not substantiated, 1 was a policy violation, 5 were substantiated, 5 were exonerated, and 2 were unfounded. Of those, internally, meaning that an officer within our department reported another officer, all 8 were substantiated. So I think that was a big difference from last year. We made it so that if you know that somebody is doing something in our department, or did one singular thing in our department that wasn't done right, you have onus is on you to report it, and it's on us to investigate it. And I think everybody's gotten that message pretty strong, because 8 times this year, somebody told us about somebody else doing something, 8 times it was substantiated. So those were handled well. And on the last page is how the action that came out of it. So as you can see, people lost days off, they were suspended, there's policies that were written. There was no action taken. Those would be the ones that were exonerated or unfounded. There were RIPA reprimands, which is the lowest form of discipline, but still something that stays in your permanent record. We had 2 people resign or were terminated during the investigation, and then Act 56, which is the state mandated reporting system. So I think we were all over on a discipline, but everybody, it was all handled, I think, properly. MRI helped us out with a couple of them. MRI is our kind of our, I don't want to use the word backup there, but they're our other alternative to investigations. They will do anything major. If we think something's going to go down a road that one is either very serious, or 2 that could be more a conflict for us, we'll ask MRI to assist, and they will take it over. But quite honestly, I run a lot of ours by them anyway, just to say, hey, what do you think? And 9 times out of 10, their answer is do it yourself. You guys got it. This is a ground ball type thing. It's easy. It's pre-cut, dry, do it yourself. But in a couple instances, they said, yeah, throw it to us and we'll handle it. And they bring the guys over from New Hampshire. We put them up for a night. They do the investigations. They write it up and they kick it back to us. So it's been a very good system. It's a very, very good partnership with them. So those are our internals. And I have a synopsis of each and every one if you want me to run through them. It's up to you. There's no names. There's just dates and the initial complaint and what happened if you want them.
I'd be interested in reading them.
I take 2 minutes. It's up to you.
Well, we don't have to read them right now, but.
Yeah, it's up to you.
I
If
can
you want to
get
get
a
back to me. So this is what, I don't know if you've ever seen the one state police puts out every quarter, every 6 months, they put out one to the press. This is, mine is written in the same exact format. Each one is, I'll just give you one example to see how long they are. Complaint externally generated January 21. The synopsis, inquiry into an allegation an officer was stopped a female for speeding. The female did not believe she was traveling as fast as she was told. She further advised that the officer said if she fought the ticket, he was going to lie to the judge and tell her she was going much faster. The outcome, the investigation and review that determined the officer did not tell the female that he would lie to the judge. The review included a review of the body camera. When confronted, the female changed her statement and said she was only telling us that because her feelings were hurt during the interaction and she did not want the ticket. This was exonerated. So that's basically how it goes. So all of our reviews involve the body-worn cameras as well. So, or the recordings on the phone lines. But that's what this is. That's how all of these are written in that format.
What kinds of things would be a department-generated internal investigation?
That means an officer
but
or.
What might typical thing be?
So an example of that, I can give you one. Let's see, one that's quite cut and dry here. External. We had one that ended up being pretty good. This is an easy one. Internally generated, an officer alleged a supervisor did not properly respond to a 911 call for service and did not activate his body-worn camera. This was a potential swatting call, and it was a swatting call, but it's one of those ones where somebody called and said that my house, we're being held hostage, send everybody. The 911, the supervisor said we're not going to that. This is bullshit, basically, that this isn't happening, but it doesn't matter, we still have to respond to that. But another officer told us that the supervisor didn't go. The result of that was 3 days loss of AL, because we need to respond regardless of what we think of it. But that was internally, we wouldn't have known about that had another officer not come forward and said, hey, this happened, and we didn't respond to that. And they did respond to that. The other officers went, but it was taken care of at the time, but it wasn't at the beginning of it. I mean, I think the sergeant knew right away, or believed right away it was a fake call, but we still have to respond to that and make sure. But that's an example of an internal call, internally generated complaint. So that officer does the same process, fills out the same complaint form, gets it to us, and we take it from there.
Good. Make sure that data sheet, that's good info.
Very good.
Bob, you good?
I'm good.
Jim Pelkey, you got any questions?
Nope.
No? Okay. Anyone in the audience have any questions? Okay.
I see a hand up. Ryer and Lauren have a hand up.
Ryer, go ahead.
Hey, this is Ryer. So I just had 2 comments. One, the term Caucasian is like super outdated. I don't know why it's being used still. It's used to basically advance really spurious racial theory that, certain groups of people are less, intelligent or whatever. So that's something I'd probably advise against using in the future. The second thing the other question I had is the response to resistance feels like a really niche category. And I was really hoping, and I attended the police advisory board meeting this last time and asked there, but I'm hoping to ask here as well. I'd really like to see the recent stop data as regards to race, because while I am happy to see that response or response to resistance or whatever the phrase is, doesn't have a huge disparity. I am worried that the St. Albans Police Department does have a huge disparity as it pertains to stopping when it comes to race, because I still know that they use Terry stops, and that's something that tends to lend itself to racial disparities and stops. So I'd love to see it published on website or just something so that it's current, because you guys were doing it once a month and then that stopped, I think, in September. So that'd be great. Thank you.
I can kind of respond to both of those. The data is back up starting January. So we did stop in September. That was on us. We moved in October, so we didn't do it. And then we had no real excuse. I talked to the lieutenant, and it's on me, but lieutenant that was doing that, we just didn't do it in October. He was off the month of November, which he takes off every year, and we didn't do it in December, but we started back up in January. The stop data is put out by the state of Vermont, so it's whenever they decide to put it out. Usually they put it out around March. That's collected on traffic tickets. However, we did run our own stop data, because Lieutenant Talley does a little better job than the state of Vermont, because he goes ticket by ticket. So I can read that to you if you want. Well, we're going to let the state of Vermont produce ours, but I do have stop data based on race and gender, and I also have arrest data that we have if you guys want to hear it. It's up to you. So we did every arrest, which, by the way, the state of Vermont doesn't request that you do race data for arrests. So this is a real work for us. Tally did it, because what we have 500 arrests. So he has to go through each arrest, because again, it's not required by the state of Vermont to keep track of it. So for arrests, all the arrests were white. In our whole 516 arrests, they were all white except 30 black, two American Indian, and 3 Asian, in 2021. Of those 30 black arrests, 27 were externally generated, which means we were called to 27 of them. 3 were proactive. 1 was on a moving vehicle violation. It was speeding, and it turned into a DUI. That's why it was an arrest. 2 were proactive we knew the person on site. One time it was a DLS stop, and the other time it was a warrant. So those were the 3 arrests. The American Indian, 2 stops, both were for speeding. 1 turned into a DUI arrest, 1 turned into a violation of conditions of release arrest. The Asian, 3 stops. There are 2 were externally generated, which means we were called to it, and the 3rd was a speeding stop, which turned into a DUI. So those were our arrest data for the year, and the rest were white individuals. The car stops. Any questions on that before we go?
So there were no arrests in the last year that were the result of a minor motor vehicle infraction that started a stop that resulted in an arrest.
3 that were proactive. 1 was from speeding that turned into DUI arrest. And then 2 which were proactive. I mean, we were driving around, but we recognized a person.
Right, but you're talking about speeding, driving with a suspended license, and somebody who recognized and there was a warrant out for them. So none of them were for like a broken tail light or that kind of thing that would be considered a Terry stop by most people.
No, nothing.
Okay, thanks.
The car stops last year, so we had 1,186 car stops. Of those by race, and by the way, these race classes are written on the back of the tickets, the state of Vermont tickets. We don't make these classes up. This is their decision. How they come up with them is how they came up with them. So of the car stops, Asian Pacific Island 1%, Black 3%, Hispanic 0.8%, Native American 0%, White 94.9%, and then female 36.9%, male 62.9%. And that's our data. So 1%, 3.3, 0.8, 0, 94.9.
You post that, Chief?
Yeah, this one is just how he broke it down, but the state's gonna put it out anyway. So they're required to put it out. Like I said, it's usually March, but I haven't heard anything yet.
You say they put it out, where do they
The
put
state
it?
puts it out, they do, every agency in the state has to comply with the race data collection, and the state of Vermont puts it out. And they put out for every single law enforcement agency in the state, they list all this data. Not arrests, just car stops. So the only place per statute that you're required to collect race data is on the back of a ticket or a crash form. That's where you collect your data. And the reason they do that is a ticket, they feel that you're collecting data based on your perception at the car stop, or a warning, ticket or warning. So when you stop a car, the officer's perception of what that person's race is, then you give a ticket or warning. That's your, you can't ask anybody, so you're using your perception and you're gauging whether you write a ticket or a warning. Then on the back of the accident form is they believe is a true indicator of who's driving in the state of Vermont, because people are in accidents on their own accord, more or less. You're not stopping them, it's just they're randomly getting in an accident, so that's giving you an idea who generally is driving in the state of Vermont. So you're again collecting race there. So that gives you an idea of who's traveling our state roads, whether they're in-state or out-of-state, or doesn't matter, they're getting in accidents anyway. So you're collecting that data and then you're comparing it to your traffic ticket and warning data to give you an idea of who's driving and then who's getting the tickets and warnings. So that data will be coming out. Why they don't collect it on arrest data, I have no idea, but they do not collect it.
So just to clarify, when you say they put it out, where does it go?
They
to?
post it, it normally goes, the state of Vermont put it on their website, then the Burlington Free Press is huge about putting it out. We'll get it, we'll put it on ours. We did last year and the year before, but I don't know, again, normally it's around March, but I haven't heard anything this year. And typically, we start getting emails that say, make sure all your tickets are entered by this date so we can decipher, go through your meaning your agency's data to upload it into ours. We haven't even gotten that email yet. So I don't know if the state's behind or what, but we haven't gotten an email saying get your data in. So Lieutenant Talley took it upon himself to get this data for us so we can put it on ours, but it won't be bunched like it is normally with every other agency out there.
Might be good just to release our own data.
Yeah.
You know, if there was a
Yeah, we can. We've got it all anyway.
eager, diligent reporter in the room taking photos, you
Yeah.
might pass it back to him.
Like I said, the arrest data is on us. I don't know if other agencies are doing this or not. And the ticket data, ours will be more accurate because Lieutenant Talley literally goes, hand flips tickets. The difference between the way we do it and check our tickets is when you give the state goes through data, officers are, if they write more than one ticket for an individual operator, more than a ticket and a warning, that's where it gets a little screwed up and skewed, because they teach you to only write the information on one ticket, and the computer's supposed to recognize that I wrote John Doe one ticket and one warning, or 3 tickets. It's supposed to understand that that's the same person. You only need data once, where a lot of times it doesn't pick it up, and if they wrote it on 2 different things, it duplicates it. It's never quite accurate. So hand picking is the way to do it, and that's the way Lieutenant Talley does it. So, because he's a stat person. So,
Chief, when the state publishes this, do they correlate all the data into one, or do they do it by police?
they do it
department?
both ways.
Oh, they do it both
They'll
ways,
do it.
okay.
They used to. When I was still with the state police, we attended it as a commanders conference. You all went, so you could see what yours,
Yeah.
particular barracks. If you were the commander, you went to see what your barracks was doing, and then you saw it as a whole.
Okay.
So I'm assuming I know that data still comes out like that, but they went by, hey, St. Albans Barracks, this is you, and this is us as a agency.
Okay, I've only seen it.
And then municipalities were lumped together. Like this is Burlington
Okay.
and St. Albans and Montpelier and everybody else.
Okay.
Um,
I was gonna say,
but-
I've seen the whole state, but I
Yeah.
haven't seen.
Yeah, they do break
And the
down.
VSP, but I haven't seen.
It's
it
usually a
broken down.
humongous file, you know,
Okay.
everybody's listed, so. But again, I have no idea when this is coming out, so I haven't heard, so we can certainly put ours on, that's not a problem. Yeah.
We have,
Chief,
go ahead, Jim.
I certainly would have more faith in Lieutenant Talley's information than states anyway, so appreciate you putting yours out and posting it.
Yeah, no, but he loves this data stuff, so.
Does Ryer have any more questions? Does Ryer have more questions?
We have a few hands up.
Yeah, Ryer.
Jamie Pinkham had hers up.
Jamie, go ahead.
Hey, Chief, can you hear me?
Yeah,
Okay.
I can. Hey, Jamie.
Okay. How are you?
Good, how are you?
So I know we talked about just because a lot of information I think came in response to that question, and I know that we've talked about this, and it might come up even at our next PAB again, just to close the loop on it. But exactly what data will you be able to start producing monthly is my first question, just to re-clarify that. And then the second thing is the race data. I know we just talked about maybe some outdated terms. That's data that's driven by the state, not by us locally. Is that correct?
So the state dictates what data you have to collect, which is, again, the race data just on tickets and warnings and accidents. We collect that as well, because we can also collect on arrests. It's just a little harder because we have to go through by hand. What data is going on the monthly, it's going to go out monthly now. We'll try post it by the 5th of the following month. It's just going to be our call volume, what the number of calls we went to, and with the top 10 type of calls, we're going to kind of group it together like that, is what we decided to do. It's basically what we used to have on there before. What we've done for the last few years is Lieutenant Kuchar's one that's done that, and he's just going to continue with what we had. Kind of show the most popular call, most common call of the month before, and how many of those there were.
So those definitions, I think we talked about Caucasian, and I think I heard American Indian, which I also think is an outdated term. Those are terms that come to you from the state. So if we want to change those.
The Caucasian was my bad on my fault on the use of force report. The other ones I gave you were right off the state tickets. Yes, the 5 I listed those are from the state.
Okay. So any changes that we'd want to make, we would need to reach out to someone at the state to recommend those changes.
They print the tickets. Yeah, they print the tickets.
That's what I thought. I just thought maybe the group could benefit from that clarification. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you, Jamie. Ryer, is that your hand still up, or do you have another question?
So it's actually Lauren. Sorry, we're both on the call. I had a question for you regarding, you mentioned something about repeat calls for under 15-year-olds. I was just wondering about the policies in place about recommending, counseling or anything like that. I was just wondering what sort of follow-up police do in the cases of under 15, especially with repeat callers, to try to prevent additional calls in the future.
Well, we don't get a lot of repeat calls from our 15. This particular person I was talking about, we were called by their counselor who was with them because they were physically on top trying to hold them down when we got called there. So that one's a little bit different than most. We obviously, if we get called to under 15, a younger kid, which we do get some calls, we typically try to take those by phone and not go to those. Try to talk to parents about what they can do without having us get involved. But if it's a situation where we're getting called because the child or younger teen has already assaulted somebody or is in the process of assaulting somebody or has something that can be used as a weapon and there's no way we're not going to be able to go, then we'll go and get the scene secure. Then we'll go through the same process of trying to talk to them about who they can use with NCSS or other counseling services that we've helped direct them towards to avoid getting to that situation in the future. But unfortunately, there are a few families that we've dealt with numerous times because they don't have a lot, I won't say they don't have de-escalation skills, they haven't found a de-escalation skill that'll work yet. But there's only a handful of those. It's getting better. Sam's been a huge help with this and setting them up with alternative services to call when it gets to that point. But there are times when things have escalated to a point that sometimes there's numerous agencies already there on scene and it still they haven't gotten a way to not call us and we end up there.
Thanks, Chief.
And then one last hand up. Reese has his hand up.
Reese, go ahead.
Yeah, hi, thank you. Hi, Chief Lamoth. I had a question about something you brought up. It made me really curious. You had said something, and I might get the language wrong, so please correct me if I'm off.
You'd be surprised.
Something around, you said like 27 out of the 30 stops of Black folks were like, it was like non-proactive.
Externally generated.
Externally generated. So like 90% of those stops were externally generated. What's that percentage for white people?
I would say if I didn't do the number because there's 480 of them, whatever. If I had to throw a number out there looking at just the arrest reasons, because that's what's in this right here, I'm going to guess it's probably the same number. It's just going through real quick. The first page right here, retail theft, petty larceny, assault, burglary, drugs, custodial interference. So it's the same type of thing. So most of your arrests are externally generated. It's a reactive arrest. You know what I mean? It's people calling us about something somebody did. So not many arrests are when you're not doing proactive car stops, you're not gonna get a lot of proactive arrests. So that's gonna be about, I'm gonna guess probably the same number, or the same percentage.
Okay, that's really helpful to understand. I was trying to hold on one hand the possibility that we have a lot of Karens in our community with the possibility that there were other reasons why people were calling. So that actually really helped me have a better understanding of what that breakdown means for you and your work. Thank you.
No, I just got to put in perspective that think about police work. Most of it is reactive, not proactive, especially in today's day.
Yeah.
So people are calling on somebody that did something wrong. So that's an external arrest, externally generated arrest. So if you put it in that, if you think about it that way, that's why that number's high.
That definitely makes sense. I could say I have worked in other environments, not that involve policing, but things that were around kind of penalizing. And we found that when there was disproportionate rates of BIPOC people kind of getting the penalties is because they were being disproportionately over-reported for those within the larger community. And so it was more of a kind of funneling in than the process around kind of penalty decision-making stuff itself. So I was curious to see what that looked like here. And I thank you for breaking that down for me.
No, I understand your question. I understand why you asked the question. And, but I think if you looked at it, you're gonna find it's probably I could break it down, but I'm guessing it's very similar ratio.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. Thanks, Chief.
Chip, any more hands up?
No one else's hands are up.
All right, we're gonna move on. Chief, thank you for your time and your presentation.
You're welcome.
We really appreciate what you presented to us tonight, so thank you and have a good evening.
No, thank you. I'll make the changes to what you made and what the other suggestions, and we'll get some data up on the website soon.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Chief.
As you're getting up, Chief, as you're getting up, have we stopped anyone for their loud exhausts?
We did last fall. This winter, no, not.
I was gonna say, it seems
last
pretty
fall we
quiet.
did education type stuff.
Yep.
But proceed.
Interestingly enough, I was in Enosburg today, and Enosburg Village is looking at a noise ordinance as well. I think it's well, that and there's no enforcement for it.
That's exactly the point. It's not consistent. So.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Chip, you're up, I think. We're going to talk about the TIF, and it's the annual report.
We have the annual report of the TIF. I won't go over the entire thing. Really, all we have to do is say that we presented it to you. But if you go through the report, it'll talk about the total values of property in the TIF district and then the increment we collected for the year. This is FY 2021. There's some information about the financing tools we've used, the public improvement projects, updates on those, the private investments that we've seen, and then there's data on jobs in the city, which we just use the state's labor report for that. Information on how many of the contractors that we use that are Vermont contractors, and then some other general updates. But basically, the TIF is doing well. We continue to collect increment. There continues to be private investment in the TIF district, which is responding to the public investments we're making. In any given fiscal year, we probably have at least 2 of the public investment projects where we're able to show some significant progress.
Chip, the thing that stood out for me probably is the extensive list of what I would call, for the most part, grants, right?
Oh, yes, we have brought in a lot of other funding sources for our public projects, state and federal funding, as well as the tax increment financing that we're getting out of the TIF district.
Just so, for the record, you have 38 different forms of grant dollars that have been invested in the community. The one question I had was you have what the amount was and what's been allocated to date.
Mm-hmm.
On number 17, you had the Federal Street. Do I understand that to be, there's about a $600,000 difference? Do I understand that to be that project is still ongoing and that balance will be spent eventually, is that?
I think that had a lot to do with how much of that grant had been spent before we had the TIF district.
Oh, okay.
So we were never able to report the entirety of the, of what we spent out of that grant. They really only want us to say, what grant sources have you used this fiscal year you're reporting on? So we did give the total amount of the original grant, which is 2.2 million, quite a while back. And by the time we were starting to do our TIF reporting, we were really only able to get started at the point where we can show we've spent 1.6 million, but we have actually spent that entire grant down, which is why we marked it as closed at the end.
And the increase is, for the record as well, the increase in value is approximately 50 million? Is that how we read that?
Yes. Yep, that's on the first real page of the report, the first colored, color printed page. Yeah, $50 million in taxable values.
And bear in mind, this is really based on April of 2020.
Right.
So we're closer to 60 already now. But if it's 60 and it'll be 60 plus this April. Any questions for Chip?
Based on April 2020 or 2021?
April of 2020, which sets the
Yeah.
list.
Okay, okay.
So, yeah, for the 2021 fiscal year, we're actually using the April 2020 grand list.
Got it.
So nothing across the street.
Congress Main isn't in it,
Okay.
so there's
And
10.
and Main Lane.
Yeah.
Anyone on the video have any questions on the TIF report? Seeing none, I'd entertain. Oh, Jim, go ahead.
No, it's nothing for me.
Okay.
I'm fine with it.
Entertain a motion to approve,
I don't think we need a motion.
You don't, all we have to do is present it
no,
to
you're
you.
right, I was looking at the number 6. Thank you.
Could have whispered that to you, Mayor.
You went close enough.
Too far away. Keep my distance.
But we'll keep your Chip on grand list certification, no aggrieved.
Before we start that, is this gonna require council signatures?
It will, but we have 4 council members here, Jim, so we're good with who's in the room.
I was gonna say, I think I will recuse myself from this discussion, and that way you won't have to make a trip up here to the Salvage Health Rehab to get my signature, okay?
Okay. The annual certification that we have no active appeals or grievances for the April 1st, 2021 grand list. We do this every year. And I can report that we have no active appeals or grievances.
So we have, for the council, we have a form in front of us that we'll sign and give to, I got one here.
Okay, you got that one?
Sarah signed it, I think, or is that?
No, that one's good. We can use that one.
Do you need a motion?
I move that we
Yes, we
approve the
do.
grand list certification.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the grand list certification. Any further questions?
Purple.
Oh, that's fine. I don't want to sign it purple.
Any further questions for Chip? Hearing none, all those in favor of the certification say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Motion passes.
Or two recused.
And with one recused with Jim Pelkey. Moving on to Chip remains in the seat. Readoption of the Vcdp municipal policies.
These are the policies that we need to adopt in order to be eligible for VCDP grants. We've normally been just readopting these policies for probably decades at this point. Actually, we've been using a lot of VCDP money as of late, probably more so than in quite a while. This form of the resolution is the same as the one you approved in December 2018 with the addition of a texting while driving section. It's basically boilerplate federal law that gets updated every once in a while, and then we have to sign on to it.
And that texting policy is specific to city employees? Is that how I read that?
Yeah, we're supposed to have a policy that employees do not text message while driving.
City vehicles, Mayor.
What's that?
City vehicles.
Yeah, well, yeah, official capacity.
Isn't that a Vermont law? Anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so you
Now
need,
it's city law.
we need a motion on that to adopt the new municipal policies.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Chad, seconded by Mike. Any other questions for Chip on that? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposition? Hearing none, motion passes. So now we're moving on, once again with Chip as well. Adoption of zoning amendment for properties in the historic register, on the historic register.
We introduced this last month. We have some design review rules that are specific to properties listed on the state or national historic register. We went into detail last month about why we've been advised to not have this kind of automatic trigger. And the reason being, very quickly, the historic registers are really meant to be inventories of learning about buildings, in many cases learning about them before they might be demolished, and making sure that that building or that historic site isn't lost to time. And they weren't really meant to be regulatory tools other than to protect such buildings from federal action or state action, but never meant to also be a local regulatory trigger. Creating the impression that having your building listed on a historic register, that it could trigger you being susceptible to additional zoning can lead some property owners to resist having their properties listed on the registers. And historic consultants and historic officials, historic preservation officials do not like that. Furthermore, the point is a community needs to decide on its own what properties deserve special preservation or special design review. The historic registers are a moving target. The eligibility will always be set at 50 years. So there are now buildings eligible for the state and national historic registers that many communities do not think are special anymore, because those communities harken back to certain foundational times in their history. For the city of St. Albans, it's the heyday of the railroad, for instance. And so upon advice of historic officials and understanding that we still have design review rules for our design review districts, where most of our key historic sites are, we put forward this amendment to remove the automatic trigger that any other buildings on the state or national historic registers would also be would also have to have design review applied to them as well.
Yeah, I need that pen.
So this is the second reading.
Anyone have any questions for Chip?
Move to adopt the zoning amendment for properties on historic registers.
Second.
Motion by Chad, seconded by Michael. Any other comments by the board? Let's go to the public. Any comments on this? Seeing none, move to a vote. All those in favor of the second reading and adopting the amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Hearing none. Zoning amendment passes. Thank you, Chip.
Thank you.
Signature. Okay, we're moving to a first reading regarding zoning amendment for planned unit developments.
Yep, we have a feature in our rules called planned unit development. Many communities have it. It's something you'll find across the nation. The most popular use of a planned unit development is to allow you to take a very large piece of land in your community, which is normally rural, and allow that landowner to develop it in a more clustered and dense fashion on one part of the land and leave the rest of the land open for common use, recreational use, or working landscape. And this is typically more useful in a community that has 1 acre zoning or 10 acre zoning. If you have a farmer who owns a piece of land and really needs to make some money off of it, which is their right, rather than force them to chop that piece of land up into 10-acre units, a plan unit development approval can allow them to take a piece of it, much denser, much more clustered, break that into house lots, and then leave the rest of the land open. We have that provision in the city zoning. It's basically the same plan unit development provision you'd find in a rural community. And it has been used. In the city, it's typically only used just to get a little bit denser development than you'd otherwise get. It's some extra review in front of the development review board, character of the area type stuff, making sure that it's appropriate. But the way the rule's written, which I don't believe has always been literally interpreted by the DRB, it requires you to have 3 times the amount of land you need to do what you want to do. So it's written as it's supposed to be a way to get a little bit more density in the development you'd like to do, but it requires you to have 3 times the land you need. So there's a problem there with the way it was written. We think it's because it was pretty much pulled cookie cutter from a typical planned unit development rule that you'd find for communities that have a lot of land. The city does not. We are a historically urban community that does a lot of infill development. And the Planning Commission also noticed that some of the waivers and allowances that the DRB is allowed to apply and approve in our planned unit development rule, there's not a lot of predictability. There aren't really guardrails. So the Planning Commission and staff have put together a rewrite of the PUD rule that gives it the same ability to be flexible and to allow for the DRB to approve something slightly different if it makes sense for the property and the neighborhood, but makes it more in line with the city's urban built-out form of development. So it's basically a strike all of the current PUD rule. It would now apply to residential properties that are on the commercial fringe, like immediately adjacent to one of our business districts, for instance, or properties that have a historic institutional building that, if it were to be empty today, would not really fit into, say, the low-density residential rules. For instance, the Warner home condos, and that use is probably one of the ways in which that historic building was saved. That's a PUD. Otherwise, if you had the Warner home empty today, the most you'd be able to put in that building is a duplex, only 2 units. And it would be hard to find a developer who's going to convert that building into that use and keep it in use and keep it maintained. For instance, if something happens at the Franklin County Senior Center, that building at the corner of Newton and Messenger, the most you'd be able to do under the current rules is a duplex there. And it might be hard to get someone to take that building on, maintain it, fix it up, if the most they can do is a duplex. But much like the Warner home under a PUD rule, and especially under this rewrite, you could apply some extra DRB review to it and maybe approve a few more units there, depending on how the conditional use review goes. You could also use a PUD for a mobile home park or a tiny home park, and that would be basically where it could be applied. We provided a few more guardrails to the allowances and the waivers that the DRB can grant. For instance, it will allow narrower setbacks than you'd otherwise be allowed, but only where you border a zoning district that has those narrower setbacks. So you'd be able to use that contextual benefit along where your neighbors also have a similar setback allowance. And the DRB would be allowed to use a higher maximum lot coverage. So they'd be allowed to let you develop more of the lot if you're adjacent to a zoning district that also has that higher lot coverage. So we added a lot more context to the sorts of waivers and allowances that the DRB can grant, and that gives better direction to the applicant for what they think they can come in and request and what they think they're going to be granted. There have always been parking, sort of some flexibility in parking for the DRB and the PUD rule, and in this rewrite, the Planning Commission set a floor. The floor is 1.3 units, 1.3 parking spaces per dwelling unit, but that is just a floor. The DRB can require more than that depending on the application that comes before them. So basically what we've done is we've taken that sort of really rural agricultural feel that you find in most PUD rules. We've rewritten for an urban setting. We've gotten very focused on what kinds of properties we could apply this flexibility to, and we've added some further direction on the kinds of waivers and allowances that the DRB could grant for a PUD. And then the rest of the amendments are just some other changes we have to make to other sections of the zoning because they reference the PUD rule, so we got to make sure that everyone jives and is working together.
Questions for Chip? Can we go back to the senior center? So if someone were to buy that down the road, they could have put multiple units within the building. Could they then also build within what's now currently the parking lot?
On the rule as it's written, they could. They could ask for the DRB to allow them to build more than one principal building. They'd have to justify why. There's already a lot of building there, for instance, that they'd be trying to fill up, probably with more than 2 units. So I mean, and they'd probably want to keep a lot of that parking. So they could make a case to the DRB to also allow another building, but chances are you're going to see a developer just focusing on the building that exists. They might build a garage or something, but that would be an accessory structure that you'd be allowed to do anyway.
So how many parcels in the city do you think would be applicable to this?
Not many. It's really written as anything built before 1968 that currently has a commercial or an institutional use. And then on top of that, what's not in the rule but is implicit in the rest of the zoning is that it would have to be a building so large that it could justify the, or a lot that's so large that it could justify the additional units, because we require at least 5,000 square feet in lot area for every dwelling unit. So it would have to be a large lot, a building that's older and is currently in institutional or commercial use. There aren't many, but the fact of the matter is that we have these some buildings in the city that would become a problem. They would become a headache if they are vacated and we're waiting for the private market, someone in the private market to come in and make that building useful again. But under our low density residential zone, the regular rules as written, it'd be really hard to do that. That's where the PUD can swoop in and someone can bring a new idea before the DRB to be considered. So there aren't a lot of Warner homes and there aren't a lot of Franklin County senior centers in the city, but when one of those becomes vacant, it becomes a big deal. So that's why we have this rule.
Council, any questions? Jim, any questions?
No questions.
Thank you. I know we have, I'm not sure if Lauren's still on as Vice Chair of Planning.
Yep, I'm still here.
Yeah, Lauren will answer all of your questions from here on out.
No, I think Chip's got it covered, but I'm here to provide backup if necessary.
So nothing to add?
No, nothing to add.
Okay.
I think he covered it really well.
Okay. So this is just the first reading. We don't need a vote at this time. Anyone, just double check, anyone in the public have any other questions?
Just a quick, would that Lake Street housing in front of the Holy Angels Rectory, would that fall under this as well?
No, because that's in the B2 district,
Still in the
business
B2.
too, so you can do a lot more in that district.
Okay.
But there's actually a building near there on Elm Street
Yeah.
that is in the low density. Yeah,
The old school.
where they're currently they're grandfathered with 8 units there. But if that building were to be empty today, the only way you'd be able to get to that 8 units is if you use the PUD rule.
Is there's an apartment house, about 12 units, I think, just on Upper Weldon Street after you cross Main Street. Is that a conventional PUD or is that just a regular old?
That's probably a PUD.
I think it might have been a PUD.
And I think that, and I don't know if the language was changed, but I think there were many cases where PUDs were granted. We got some great results, but that provision of needing 3 times the amount of land for the use, that might not have been read as literally as it has been by the DRB lately. And so we've had some potential PUD applications that just are DOA because of that provision. So that's what set us on this, and that's when we started reading it and realizing, well, wait a second, there are a whole lot of things that need to be improved about this rule. So here we are.
Okay, any other questions? So we'll discuss this again in March, Chip?
Yes.
All right, we're moving on to, moving on to item number 10, which is the public hearing for the proposed charter amendment for the appointed clerk or treasurer position. So, Dom, do you want to touch on that?
Yeah, quickly, the next three agenda items are just final reminders and tune-ups for the town meeting vote coming up in March. This one concerns the move to an appointed city clerk and treasurer. Language for each, which reads, effective July 1st, the city council shall appoint a city clerk. This clerk shall perform for the city the same duties devolving by law upon town clerks, except as far as the same are rendered unnecessary by this charter, and shall collect the same fees therefore to be paid into the city treasury for use of the city. We also recognize that the city clerk and treasurer may be one and the same person, and the reciprocal language is also proposed for the city treasurer position.
Does anyone have any comments on that?
Don, is this already the language on the town meeting ballot?
This is the language on the ballot, Jim, and we're
This is
required.
gonna be voted on, correct?
This has got to be voted on. We're required to hold a number of hearings. We've got TIF hearings and charter amendment hearings and Australian ballot vote hearings. And so we're just lumping them all into one series of hearings so that we be sure we check all the boxes.
I understand, but I have an issue with B that you've eliminated. As you know, I was very adamant that we continue electing a city clerk until we agreed that it should be appointed by the city council and answerable to the city council. And it looks to me in B that we're eliminating any council appointment in case a city clerk doesn't go to the end of the term. If there's a vacancy in the office, somebody gets ill or somebody quits, we have to be able to appoint someone to fill that vacancy. So my feeling is, in case of a vacancy in the office of the city clerk, vacancy should be filled with the city council, period, and eliminate the rest of the language. But I think that has to stay in there, unless I'm missing something.
Yeah, Jim, the lawyer who drafted its opinion was that that's covered by A and B is redundant. So whether you appoint in all cases, whether it's due to a vacancy or the first time, the only way you get a city clerk or a city treasurer is by appointment from the city council.
Okay. I don't know if I agree with that, but sorry.
Can I say one thing to that? So,
Let's agree with this lawyer.
hey, Jim, just to, in order to get this approved, it's gonna have to go through the House Gov Ops and Senate Gov Ops and be passed by the legislature. And if we need to do a little bit of tweaking and cleanup of the language, we can do that. But I'll be sure to ask Legislative Council when it gets to that point, if the voters approve this language, if he agrees with our city attorney on the interpretation that Don just mentioned.
And I have the same argument regarding the city treasurer, just for clarification.
Jim, was your question, is the same thing in play for the city treasurer?
Yes, the vacancy language, I think some of that needs to stay in. Same argument, basically.
Yep.
Okay. That's all. Thanks.
So just, let's assume this gets approved on town meeting day. Mike, can you elaborate on process after that?
Yeah, so when the voters, assuming the voters approve this language on town meeting day, I've already gotten dispensation from the relevant chairs to take it up, notwithstanding the usual crossover deadlines in the legislature, because charter changes that are adopted in March are exempt. So it'll be a committee bill. Since we've already got the language, they'll just put that in bill form, and we'll put it through our committee in the House that I serve on House Gov Ops. It'll go over to the Senate, and I imagine it'll be approved by April by both bodies, and then the governor signs it, and we're done.
Tom, can you just give us a quick update on the staffing of the office as it sits now, and between now and July, what's your vision?
So right now, it's largely, right now Curry is still in office, and her assistant is Sarah. And Sarah's holding down the fort in both the zoning office and the clerk office. Once Curry is no longer in office in early March, then a vacancy will occur, and we will bring forward one of the existing staff members who's a city resident, who doesn't have a conflict with their other duties, and recommend that the council appoint that person to fill the office of clerk and treasurer, and that person will appoint Sarah as the assistant, and that person, Sarah, will continue to do the same duties until we bring forth a permanent candidate for your consideration, hopefully around July 1.
Yep. Anyone got any questions on this?
I have a sort of a comment. I have a few constituents who expressed some concern, not about the proposed amendment, but about somebody coming forward and getting enough write-in votes to become a city clerk. And I think you mentioned at one meeting that it would take 30 votes to do that. Have we heard anything about anybody staging any campaign like that?
Yeah, it's a good question. You still have to get over the bar of the required number of signatures. We haven't reflected on the fact that the governor changed that for candidates, right? So we'll have to see how that happens. You know, I share the concern. If it happens, we'll react to it at that time. But essentially, that person would be the clerk and be the treasurer until Mike can get this through the legislature. We might call our legislator and ask for fast track.
Yeah, we're gonna do this expeditiously.
You know, I have had some folks who say I have an interest in the job permanently and wondering if they should try to run as a write-in candidate. And we discourage them from doing that. It just makes for a real disorganized recruitment process, I think.
Yeah.
So.
Okay.
Yeah,
They
good question.
were, you know, looking at the dark side of it, but hopefully we won't even get to that.
So you're saying, Don, if somebody on town meeting day gets 30 write-in votes and gets elected, basically, that after the charter change, they can be removed from the office and the council appoints someone else?
Yes, the playing field, so to speak, that they would be occupying only exists until the legislature passes the charter amendment. Once they do that, then that position evaporates. It wouldn't be removed per se. They would just kind of go poof, right? There is no more position.
That's unusual. I've never seen anything like that happen before.
That's the beauty of that notwithstanding language in the legislative process, right? So.
You got to watch out for that notwithstanding. That can,
yeah.
Anytime you see one of those,
cut both the legs.
Yeah, it really does.
So I guess I won't run as a writing candidate. Thank
Does anyone have any other comments on this? Seeing none, we'll move from the public hearing on the proposed charter amendment, moving on to public hearing on proposed set of tax incremental financing for use of preparation and environmental remediation of development lot at 100 Federal Street.
Chip and Tom are going to take this one.
Good.
100 to 120 Federal Street's a potential commercial redevelopment, but it does have some environmental issues, typical of what you'll find in most city lots. It's a lot of urban fill issues, heavy metals in the soil, PAHs. And so the proposal here is to use TIF funding to purchase the site, do the environmental management remediation, and just prepare the site for commercial development. And likely what you're going to see is that the soil that has to come off the site will have to be treated like solid waste and brought to a landfill. And then the rest of the site will be fine as long as it's paved over or built over and just being kept in place by the development that happens there.
The information sheet in your packet, in speaking with our regulator, they want us to make sure we're 100% transparent, so they want us to go through this sheet, even though it's in the packet and we've done it once before. So the short version is this is $500,000 in TIF debt. We've already issued $20.5 million in TIF debt through a series of bonds. We're looking at issuing a 20-year bond for this. We have to include estimated interest rates and principal and interest, and so I put 3% to be conservative. But I'm in the final stages of issuing the pool debt, and we're looking at a 25-year bond for that, and it's closer to 2%. So if that 3% number proves high, the estimated principal and interest would go down, obviously. We have to disclose that we're estimating $100,000 in related costs, which is broadly defined as a lot of things, but it's consulting fees, pre-construction, it's sometimes engineering fees, pre-construction, all the soft costs that roll into it. So that's not in addition to the $500,000, that's included in it. There's no interfund loan for this. We're not leaning on the water or wastewater funds. This is a simple municipal bond offering to fund the TIF. We do have, in our TIF financial plan, assume $800,000 in increment from this project. That TIF financial plan has been seen by VEPC a number of times now. And then the bottom piece is the notice regarding insufficient increment. And I read this last time. I don't think I need to read it a second time.
If we don't make enough TIF increment, we have to pay the debt some other way. That's what it says.
So it's a city general obligation bond. If the TIF isn't there, it's the city's bond. So I think we've met the public disclosure requirement.
And this is the only TIF piece on the ballot.
This March, yeah.
Yeah.
Anyone got any questions for Tom or Chip?
Nope.
You good, James?
Good.
The public have a question or comment regarding this project? Seeing none.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, just real quick.
Yep.
Right now, the end of the TIF is within sight. For all
Means what, Dom?
our ability to do some of these large, ambitious projects is going to be scaled back. We've got 2 more votes, essentially. November of '22 and March of '23. And that's it. So unless there's any extension from the legislature, I'm just giving you a preview of things to come. We've got a few loose ends that we need to tie up on some development projects. And we'll be working with the council and assembling some of those likely for the November and March votes. So Fonda, the other two lots at Fonda, for instance, some of the other projects that we've talked about the council from a real estate development perspective.
So it's come 2023, that'll be 10 years, because it went from 5 to 10, right?
Yeah, yeah, actually a little more than that.
We got a COVID extension.
Oh,
Because of
good one.
COVID, we got a year extension.
Mike?
And to be clear, when you say it's the end of the TIF, just for the folks back home, you're saying that it's the last opportunity we'll have to take on more debt that can be financed using the TIF.
Yeah, I mean, we're about, 60% of the way through. We've still got, we're running out the tail on those bonds. But our ability, to do some of the large, charismatic, generational, game-changing projects, we can see the end of that ability. Our debt issuance period expires in March of '23.
Just to clarify, you could still go to bond, but it'd be on the cities.
Yeah, and our ability, the public-private partnership model, the sharing risks, some of the things we've done recently with the storefronts, some of the things we've done in the neighborhoods, all of that continues. It's just, it's really a question of scale.
Right.
The ed fund pays about 2/3 of the bond cost.
Okay. We don't need a vote on this. Anyone have any final questions, comments? Okay, we'll move off from the public hearing on the TIF piece for 100 Federal Street. Moving to number 12, which is the FY23 budget.
Budget can be broken down into 3 separate questions on the town meeting warning. The one article is the general fund base budget and includes a 4% increase in the tax rate. We've talked about that in previous hearings. That's our inflationary year-to-year increase. We also have 2 additional articles. One is a $25,000 article for the St. Albans Museum, and the third is a proposed embedded crisis worker in the police department for $100,000. All 3 of those combined is just under a 3% increase in the tax rate at 2.9.
Any questions or comments from the council? Covered this back in January as well.
Yeah, yeah.
Anyone from the public have any questions on that? Seeing none, we'll, no votes needed, obviously. Reese, go ahead.
Hi, I have a question about this. So it says that the embedded crisis worker could be a freestanding article. Does that mean that $100,000 is in addition to the quote unquote efforts to maintain adequate budget for staffing levels in the police department? So that would be $100,000 on top of what they're asking for adequate budgeting staff levels. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, it's a $100,000 add.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, we'll move on to item number 13, which is the, we'll turn over to Mr. McCarthy regarding the reapportionment for the ward map.
Yeah, so you'll, thank you, Mr. Mayor. You'll find in your packets the side-by-side maps of a proposal that I'd like us to kind of at least have a straw poll on tonight and then hopefully officially take up at our next meeting. So for context, I did a presentation which for the Board of Civil Authority last week where I went into some detail about the principles of reapportionment and the design of legislative districts. And what you'll find in the side-by-side is that we have wards that have boundaries that were last set in 1968. Our city charter says that we, from time to time, should redraw those ward boundaries either by resolution or by ordinance. So that gives us a lot of latitude. But it says once we do it, we shouldn't do it again for at least 5 years. Well, we took that really seriously, and we haven't done it for 53 years. So it's been a while. A lot has changed in the city of St. Albans since 1968. And you'll see in the population deviation, so the census data that was taken in 2020 and released last year is what's driving the numbers that you'll see here. So the most glaring issue is that in Ward 5, there are close to 1,400 people. I think it's 1,377.
Yep.
And then in Ward 4, in my ward, there are 925. So that represents a net 40% roughly deviation. And what's ideal is that that be less than 10%. 15 or 16 can pass constitutional muster. 40% is in violation of the constitutional principle of one person, one vote. So I think it's good for us to take the recent census data and redraw the lines. I've put together this proposal with a couple different principles in mind, to try to get the deviations as close to ideal. So if you take the 6,877 people that the 2020 census say live in the city, and you divide that by 6, you get an ideal ward number would be 1,146 people. So a couple of the wards are kind of right in that range. I would say Ward 6 was the closest to being kind of perfect just the way it is. The lines are drawn along the census blocks. So census blocks use the middle of streets. So for example, the western boundary of Ward 6 in this map is Edward Street. So everybody on the west side of Edward Street would be in Ward 2 on the new map, and everybody on the east side would be in Ward 6 south of Lake Street. You'll notice that Ward 3 in this map becomes more of a downtown facing district instead of having kind of a peninsula jut out into the south side of Lake Street. Ward 2 becomes kind of the west coast of St. Albans, and encompasses the school all the way south past Lake Street. Ward 1 is a lot like what it is today, except that it evens out the population by taking the census block that's got about 126 people in it, I think. That is west of Main Street and north of Lower Newton. Ward 4 and 5 had that big deviation, and talking with Representative Farrar and just looking at areas of common interest, I think it kind of makes sense to just continue south down Main Street and have Ward 4 pick up the area kind of around and behind BFA. So that would be the areas between Lincoln and Main, south of Fairfield down to Diamond Street would become a new part of Ward 4 and kind of be taken from Ward 5 in order to even out the population between those two wards that's so disparate in the current maps. So this is just a draft proposal, but time is of the essence because the legislature is doing the legislative redistricting. And what the Board of Civil Authority was faced with was that the majority of the board wanted to have single seat legislative districts. So recall it right now, the city and the southern part of the town are represented by myself and Representative Casey Toof. We have a hybrid city district that shares those two representatives with that part of the town that's kind of south of the city between I-89 and Route 7. And then Representative Dickinson has a single seat district, and the city and the town together continue to have about the right number to have 3 representatives. So that is staying the same. But the Board of Civil Authority had a strong majority for adopting single seat districts, but had a secondary consideration that we shouldn't chop Ward 6 in half, which is where the line was drawn in a draft map that was done by the Legislative Apportionment Board. So Representative Toof and I both support the BCA's recommendation of going to single seat districts. And if we get the wards evened out, then what we can do is have a district that has wards 1, 2, 3, and 4 have a single seat in the Vermont House. And then wards 5 and 6 be a hybrid district with the town. And then the remainder, just like it is today, would be a single seat district. So you'd have one city district, one half and half district, and one town district for the 3. And then everyone in wards 1 through 4 would know that they've got that legislator, and if I run for re-election, that's me. Wards 5 and 6 and that neighborhood south of the city and the town would have Representative Toof if he wins re-election, and then the rest of the town today has Representative Dickinson as an incumbent. So be a little bit different, but I think it makes it easy for the voters to understand, if they live in this ward, this is who their representative is, and the ward boundaries sync up with the legislative districts. It solves the constitutional issues and just makes clarity for the voter rolls, for the justices of the peace, and for the clerk. So this is a proposal that would love to get feedback on over the next few weeks, but I think the legislature, absent any objection from the city, now that we've got a positive recommendation from the Board of Civil Authority, is going to at least use the boundaries that I and the BCA have proposed for wards 5 and 6 as and how they sync up with wards 2, 3, and 4 as the legislative district boundaries. So my recommendation would be that we blow up these maps, stick them side by side so that people can see them during town meeting day voting. And there's a nice write-up in the Messenger. I think WPTZ is going to have a story about this tonight.
They already did.
Oh, they did. Okay, great. I hadn't seen it pop up online, but so kind of trying to get the word out. So if people want to make any recommendations, they can. But yeah, I think it's after 53 years, it's time.
Thanks, Mike. Couple things. Chad, you brought this to our attention back in the fall, so thank you for
We've been
that.
talking about this for years.
Yeah, so thanks and thank Mike for all his work on this for sure. Can you just reinforce? I was unable to attend the BCA meeting, but so the consensus is that the BCA supported what you presented.
Yeah, the BCA sent us a letter today. I think that came to the council too. I think it came to me and as part of GovOps, but I'll forward it to the council if it didn't. But Joe Luno, who chairs the BCA, sent a letter summarizing the action from last Monday, and or sorry, it wasn't Monday, it was the 8th. Tuesday, yeah.
It was unanimous.
Time's a flat circle. Yeah, there was unanimous support for moving this map forward and doing the legislative district division this way.
Someone, you got questions?
Just that I think that Mike's done a good job on this, and from my Ward 5 perspective and the handful of people that I've talked to, that they think this is a good, we don't want to lose any people in Ward 5, but something has to be done, and this is as good as can be done. We went back and forth on a few other proposals, so yeah, I think it's a good plan, and I agree that I was at the BCA meeting and everyone seemed to be totally on board with this, and then the other matter of redistricting, which isn't within our scope tonight, but yeah, I think it's a good plan, and I think Mike we should go ahead with it.
So Dom, can you work with Mike to get those blown up and displayed?
Yep.
So just in short,
Mike,
Go ahead, Jim.
Mike, how many, what's the population of the town residents that are represented by the city?
Today, Jim,
Yes.
in the current Franklin 3-1. So right now, all 6,877 city residents plus it's roughly 2,500 town residents. It might be a little more, it might be like 26 or 2,700, but it's about that. So
So Representative Toof would have a smaller district than you would?
No, so in the new map, as proposed, wards 5 and 6, and have about 2,200 people, and the area south of the city that we have in the new district has about 2,300 people, so it's roughly 50-50. It's a little bit over the ideal legislative district. It's closer to 4,500, but it's pretty close to 50-50 in the new map.
It's a good thing I'm not running again. I'm now in Ward 3.
One of the things, the sort of last criteria that you're allowed to consider at the legislative level is incumbency, and I don't think I might have drawn it exactly this way, Jim, if you were running again.
Yeah, Mike and I had a discussion on this. I just wanted to pose chain a little bit.
So I just want to say it has to be done. So it's like, it's not an option. We have to do something. Ward 6 is probably the least impacted in this, so it makes my boundaries in Ward 6 a heck of a lot easier. Going down Edward Street, the neighbor behind my house is currently not in my ward, and they would be, and it would basically the east side all the way down would be in my ward, or west side, which would be a heck of a lot easier instead of zigzagging, because it's part of Edward, then it bumps onto the other side of Edward, then halfway down between Lower Weldon and Guyatt Circle, it comes back onto only my side. So this, as far as Ward 6 is concerned, this makes it a heck of a lot easier.
Yeah, there are some funny things in the 1968 map. Like there's a tiny bit of Lincoln that's in Ward 4, kind of inexplicably, and I don't know if that was like just a little bit of a gerrymander to kind of grab a city council person, or I don't really understand why some of the lines are what they are, but they've been that way for 53 years, and kind of.
Mike, what's the probability we're going to go to one vote, one district? Is that good? The one representative per district, is that like a set deal?
Yeah, so here we already gave preliminary approval for this in concept, and so we could move which block is exactly the line at this point. But yeah, here because the BCA was so strong in their support for one representative districts. Casey and I both testified, and Joe testified for the city BCA, and Brian Delorier testified for the town, that they're all in support of this proposal for one representative per district instead of having the 2 seats here.
So if that doesn't go statewide, we'll still do the breakup?
Yeah, okay. Yeah. I think, there's there are lots of places where I think we'll keep 2-seat districts in order to not have internal divisions in towns. But because we already have some internal subdivisions with the wards, it kind of makes sense here more than it does in like a very small rural community to sort of split them in half. Like I know the town of Franklin really didn't like the single seat districts up, and you've got 4 towns along the border in Franklin County, for instance, that in order to make single seat districts, you got to cut one of them like right down the middle. So we'll probably still see some 2-seat districts in other places, but here we're almost certainly moving to single seats now.
Thank you.
So process is what, Mike?
Yeah, so I think the legislature is doing its thing. If I don't hear any negative feedback, I'm going to continue to support the legislative district being drawn along where 5 and 6 in my proposal will go with the town. And I'd like to get feedback, and then at our next meeting have a resolution that we can adopt where we can vote on the new boundaries. And if there's a block we got to move here or there for one reason or another, we can do that.
Okay. Let's move on to item number 14, which is potential or proposed community visit from the Vermont Council on Rural Development.
Do we have any public comment on that map?
I thought I asked already.
Okay. You got it.
I think people can't see when my hand is up on the image. I think I have a really light background, but it's been up.
I see your hand up.
You got a comment, Reese, on this end?
Yeah, and it looks like either Lauren or Ryer does as well. So one question I just had as we're looking at the changes. First of all, Mike, thank you for your work on this. It's really helpful information to have, and it's interesting to be able to see the maps. And I saw the St. Albans Messenger article as well. I'm curious if like why the ideal ward population is set at that number, and if this is an opportunity to have additional wards within St. Albans City.
Oh, yeah. Well, we've had a 6-member council historically. So I did not contemplate the idea of having additional council, especially since 1968, we've actually have roughly 1,000 people less in the city. So having more didn't seem to make sense. And shrinking the council, I mean, it seems to function pretty well. So I hadn't even contemplated that. But yeah, I mean, we would have to, I think the number of our ward districts would be a charter change. So we can change the boundaries by resolution or ordinance because the state has delegated that authority to us. But if we want, it would be a much bigger deal to change the number because I think we'd have to change our charter. Am I right about that, Don? Yep. Yeah.
Are we on par with what it looks like? Is there kind of an average number of population, population per ward across the state of Vermont? Do we know where we fit in that?
Yeah, so Burlington has 8 wards, I believe, and a population that is 7 or 8 times, 7.5 times ours. So they have a couple more counselors. There aren't that many cities, so I think we're more comparable with like Barrie, for instance. I think we're pretty in line with their wards. Rutland is bigger than us. I think they have about 15,000 people, so roughly double, but they only have 4 wards. So it's a little bit of a mix, but we're kind of on a sort of exponential base, or we're kind of in the middle of the pack, I would say, in terms of the population represented by each person. It's in Vermont, all legislative districts tend to have a pretty small population. Like I was talking to a friend who's running for city council in Los Angeles, and his council district has hundreds of thousands of people in it. So, it's like when you look across the country, all of our House districts, our Senate districts, they're all much smaller than in other places, but our democracy is just much more intimate here, and I like that.
Me too.
Thank you. That's helpful info. Mike, appreciate it.
I think it was about 18 years ago, our school boards were done in the same wards. We did it by wards, and we just couldn't get people to be on the school board doing it by wards, so they got rid of the wards and made it general, which has pros and cons. I mean, there was a time where there was 3 people on the board that lived right next to each other. But at least they had a full board and, weren't stuck with 2 or 3 vacancies they couldn't fill.
So Ryer or Lauren, do you have a comment?
Yeah, thanks. So we're in Ward 5, and so this affects us directly. It's hard not to take this personally, Mike. I'm just saying. But really, I totally understand the reason why. I think it's it makes sense. I do feel the ward breakup feels a little like before. It makes sense currently, and this tends to feel a little bit gerrymandered. I don't want it isn't, but it just looks a little off. And yeah, but I understand why, and I think overall I definitely support the need to kind of regulate and break up the wards and make sure that they're all pretty even. I do, as someone who bought our house just recently, just a few years ago now, it is a little frustrating to have to readjust to having representation that's different. And but overall, I know our ward doesn't change much, but from a standpoint of a statewide representation, I think it's a little frustrating that this move is happening, because it essentially cuts the 2 wards off from the rest of the city in terms of representation, and means that we're kind of forced to interact with a town that isn't necessarily along the same lines in terms of what the needs and necessity are. But I understand why it is. But I do hope that, you know, that's taken into consideration as you go forward, that as these R2 wards will be essentially cut off from the city in terms of representation, and that it's important to remember that looking forward. So that's about it.
I'm confused why you think that, because Representative Tooth is elected by city residents. He's still, instead of having both of them represent you, have one of them. So I don't see where you feel you're getting cut off from the city.
Well, we'll have different representation than 2/3 of the city. So our representation will be different than 2/3 of the city. It will make
Sure.
it so that we're represented by different people, and that just means that we'll have different, you know, we have needs that are different maybe than the town. And so therefore our needs won't necessarily be represented, or maybe the towns won't be represented going forward. Like there's two different groups of people who have different needs based on what the municipalities they live in are giving them. And so those needs will be different. And it just creates a barrier to one group or another maybe having equal representation.
Good.
Okay, anyone else? Seeing none, we're going to move on. Thank you. We're going to move on to item number 14, which is a proposed community visit from the Council on Rural Development. For those who may not be aware, Council on Rural Development does community visits. In this county, they've been to Fairfield, Enosburg, Montgomery, Swanton, and maybe soon to be Highgate, and Richford. And basically, it's that they pulled the community together to have a conversation about how we want to move the community forward. It varies from town to town, but it is it's a long process which needs local leadership relative to keeping having the visit is the easy part. Keeping it going is the hard part. And I know Mike's been in conversation with Jess Frost down in the town, and so I'll turn it over to you, Mike.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. The VCRD community visits, like the mayor was saying, it's a pretty powerful facilitated process for the community to come together and set goals and do a deep dive into sort of where do we want different aspects of the community to go, what do we want the community to look like in the future, and to really engage the public in an interactive way that's facilitated by the Vermont Council on Rural Development. The Jessica Frost, who's on the select board, you know, she and I had approached both the select board and the city council a while back about interest, and so we got kind of penciled in on a waiting list, and the VCRD now is looking at which communities they're going to go to next, and if there's still support from both the town and the city, you know, they would come to St. Albans and do a joint city and town session. You know, I think all of us recognize that the city and town have municipal governments have had a little bit of friction lately. I don't think that's any secret. But I think that a lot of the residents here, you know that we have a lot of, you know, shared interests, and that it kind of goes beyond some of the municipal and administrative and project and ownership strife that we've had. So I'm still thinking that we would want to have the VCRD do the community visit, that we would want to invite town and city residents to be a part of that. It doesn't have any cost to the municipalities that are involved. It's just supported by the VCRD. So if we're still a go and we have partners in the town that are still a go, then I think that VCRD is ready at their February 22nd meeting to recommend that we be one of the next communities that gets a visit.
So Mike, if we go forward, if we say, yeah, we're all in favor, everyone here, city council's good to go, we're good, we want to go forward, and the town select board says, no, as a town select board, we're not going to support this, could we still do it and invite residents and invite those select board members that are good to go, or is that going to hurt us in the eyes of VCRD?
You know, I think VCRD might feel uncomfortable. They haven't said, no, we won't do it, but they've been looking for buy-in from both municipal boards, the council and the select board. So it would be really unfortunate, I think, if one community, you know, if one municipal legislative body said, yes, we want to have VCRD come, and the other was like, no, this isn't the right time. It's such a powerful tool, and I don't know if like engaging people from the town and the city could show both the city and the town governments that there's broad consensus on certain things. It might also show that, you know, there's some things that town residents would rather not have that city residents want to have, and we'll have to go our separate ways on some things. But I am optimistic that it would reveal some more commonality and maybe be helpful in reducing some of the friction. But
So I have a call scheduled for Wednesday with Brian Lowe.
Okay.
For a couple different discussions, and this is one of them, and he's checking in to see if we're ready to move forward. If I had a concern, it's the fact that probably the individuals who are sort of leading the charge are getting off the town select board.
Mm-hmm.
You know, both Jess and Aaron have chosen not to run again. So I guess what I would maybe ask of this is to see if they can give us a month. I know they need to make that decision or they want to make the decision for February 22nd, but it'd be nice to sort of see who gets elected, have that conversation over the next month or more, 6 weeks, and see if that's going to, because I think to your point, we don't want to go that far down the road and then have to pull the carpet out from underneath them. I mean,
yeah.
In terms of not knowing who's going to get elected and what their feelings are. That would be my suggestion, just because Jess and Aaron were the advocates, and now they're both going to be gone.
Now that sounds like a good one. So is it kind of the consensus here that I should see if I can buy us some more time and we can?
I can have that conversation on Wednesday.
Okay.
When I talk to him, that's no problem.
I think it's a great idea. You know, my recommendation would be for town residents to reach out to their representatives on the select board and have a discussion with them about it. But I'm supportive of it.
Yeah, I don't know who. I guess I'd be curious as to who those advocates would be. And maybe Jess knows. Maybe Jess can bring it to the table, but that, I can update folks after my call with Brian on Wednesday. And he may say, well, it doesn't sound like it's right, but we'll see where he stands on it.
Okay.
If that works, if you're good with that.
Yeah, I definitely don't want to waste VCRD's time if we can't get some buy-in from our partners in the town.
Okay, so we'll do some homework on that, see if we can get a little bit of an extension so we can have the conversation. Moving on to item number 15, which is consider appointments to the Park and Rec Commission. We have 4 individuals, Morel Bunbury, Jen DeSorger, Joanne McGinn, and Stina Booth, all looking to be renominated. All are current board members of the Park and Rec Commission. All have been actively involved over the years on both the Parks Commission and the now Parks and Rec Commission, and they are all interested on being reappointed, and Kelly Vian's the director, would love to have them all reappointed by the council.
As Morrill and Jen's has expired, is Joanne's and Stina's expired as well, or are they just moving over?
They're just moving over.
Okay, so I will move to appoint Morrill and Jen to terms that expire on 12/31/24, and to move Joanne and Stina to the Parks and Rec Board with their current expiration dates on their terms.
Second.
Motion by Chad, seconded by Bob to move forward with the nominees as presented on the agenda. So, any other comments? Jim, any questions?
No, no questions.
Okay,
I'm good with that.
so we have a motion from Chad, seconded by Bob. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposition? Hearing none, the slate as presented is appointed. Before we do warrants, we'll move on to the amended agenda, which includes the mayor's report and the council report.
I think the council report was first.
Was it? I don't think so. My only thing, James, we're sorry you can't be with us today. We know that you've had ongoing health issues. And I'll run this up to you. At your place of care, but I'd like to read this to you. It's a wooden plaque that we had designed and made up for you, and it reads, "The Honorable James Pelkey, Ward 2 Alderperson, St. Albans City Council, in sincere gratitude for the dedicated service, assistance, guidance, and outstanding leadership you've provided to the citizens of St. Albans for over 20 years. Your efforts on the City Council have been a positive impact on our community and will be felt for years to come. You have set an example to be followed in the future and cherished by those of us that were fortunate enough to experience it ourselves. From your friends and colleagues on the St. Albans City Council, St. Albans, Vermont." So James will deliver this to you. It's we wanted to make sure we recognized your time and commitment to the city over the years. And from me, I sincerely thank you for all of your time and dedication.
I told myself I wasn't going to get emotional, but I guess you're making it hard not to. Nothing has been more rewarding to me in my life than working with this group of alderpersons and mayor. I really am going to miss you guys. I will get my legs straightened out. I'm waiting patiently for surgery to be scheduled for a new knee. Once I schedule it, I can figure out transportation. Anybody knows a wheelchair van service that drives to Dartmouth, let me know. And otherwise, I'm just kind of, I'll be going home. I'll be leaving here and going home probably within the next week or 10 days. So I'll be home out of rehab in a wheelchair. But until I get my new knee, I'm sort of stuck. So I appreciate it. Jamie, I assume you're still there. Good luck on the on town meeting day. I know you have some opposition to Newell Decker. I think Ward 2 is going to be well represented no matter what the result is. So I feel good about that. And again, thank you all for what I don't think I deserve is what you say on that plaque, but I appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, we thank you, James, and I'll be up to see you before the end of the week.
Okay, thank you.
And I learned when you first got in the hospital that not to go empty-handed, that you have no dietary restrictions. So I like that. And I'll bring you more treats.
Sounds good.
Okay, let's move around. Jim, do you have anything else to share?
No, I really have sort of been not available in my ward lately, so no, I have nothing.
Okay, thank you. Bob?
Yeah, I'd like to join in what the mayor said about Jim. He's You've been a great public servant for many years, and I've only been on the council for about a year, but I knew you were on the council before that, and I've had dealings with you, and I think you've done a fantastic job. So thank you very much from me and everybody in Ward 5 also.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you for your support, and I appreciate that.
I got a couple of other very, very minor things. One is my people up in Ward 5 are interested in what the paving schedule might be, so I guess I'll just call Marty if he's not.
Marty was on.
And find out what might be in the works, because there's a couple of streets they want done. And the sidewalks painting, he started doing them, but not totally done yet. And finally, I have a pet peeve, which is there's still some Christmas decorations up in the park, a couple of sleighs, and I feel that by the end of January, all those should be gone. So the churches or whoever puts them up, I think, on a yearly basis, perhaps by the end of January, that we should encourage them to take them down.
I think the only issue with that is they get frozen into the ground. Yeah. And I think part of the issue is upon removal, there could be damage.
Okay,
so I
well,
think,
okay,
but we do have a 50-degree day coming on.
Say
We've
Saturday.
had a couple of 50-degree days already.
That was on the weekend.
Anyway, that's a minor thing, but
Thank you.
thought I'd mention it anyway.
Chad?
I'll go last.
I said Chad.
So I'll go last.
Mike?
I talked a lot. I've had my head in maps and a lot of stuff. Haven't heard a lot in Ward 4. You know, I gotta say, I really appreciate the sidewalk plowing. Just out there walking the dog a couple times a day, it is just amazing. After we hit big snows, and you know, within a few hours, you can just walk all around on the sidewalks. It's just incredible. So
You know, we have 3 now, I believe, and we used to try to do it all with 1. So
it is very, very nice.
yeah, absolutely.
Hey, Jim, if you don't mind me asking, how old are you?
How old am I?
Yeah.
Too old.
Old enough to know better than answer that.
Yeah, I mean,
68.
as I read that plaque, you know, the amazing thing to me is that you've, a third of your life has been dedicated to the city. You know, just a little bit less than that. And I think,
I'm not done. I will get involved. I'll be involved with the city in some fashion. You might see my name out there to be appointed to some board once I get back on my feet. You never know. So
we did talk about earlier off camera about putting you on the trash committee.
We'll have to create a trash czar
Yeah,
position.
All right, moving to Chad.
Well, that's just Jim's assuming that we're going to appoint him. I'm sure we're going to do that. Jim, I got something just for you, but the lights on Newton and Weldon still are not working. They're not sensing any cars. So it's been going on now for a year and a half or whatever. So
Where?
the ones at Newton
Yeah.
and the ones at Weldon.
Yeah,
don't
got it.
sense cars.
Yeah.
So if we can't get them fixed, just say we can't get them fixed. We keep saying we're going to have the parts for them. And
Just a
it's
standard
just a
cycle.
standard cycle.
Standard cycle.
So the other day I stopped at Newton on Main Street.
Yeah.
There wasn't a car around. It was me,
Yeah.
and a red light was there. So, Jim, thank you very much. I don't have much to say. You've been quite a mentor for me for many, many years. I've appreciated everything you brought, your humor, your perspective. You have represented your ward very well. So after we do the minutes and everything, it would be an honor if you would adjourn us for the last time.
okay,
Thank you.
sounds good.
Anything else, Chad?
Nope, that's it.
All right, let's move on to approval of warrants. And Tim's not here, so I don't know if we're gonna be able to move on.
I move that we approve.
Motion to approve the warrant.
Second.
Motion to approve the warrant of 13122 by Jim, seconded by Chad. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
No, hearing no opposition, warrants are approved. We're moving on. In the back of your agenda, we have 3 meetings to approve from minutes. So the first one, approve the minutes from 12/13/21.
So moved.
Motion by Chad, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mike. All those in favor of the minutes? Actually, are there any amendments or corrections? Anyone? Okay, motion to approve the minutes from 12/13/21, say aye.
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 Any opposition? Hearing none, minutes approved from,
Jordan, two abstains.
okay, Jim abstains. Then we had two special meetings, the first one, 1/18/22,
Move to approve.
moved by Chad to approve.
Second.
Seconded by Jim, we'll give Jim that one. Is there any corrections or changes to that? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposition? Hearing none, the motion passes to approve minutes 1/18. Special meeting from 1/27/22. Entertain a motion.
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved by Chad, seconded by Mike to approve special meeting minutes from 1/27/22. Any changes or corrections? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposition? Hearing none.
Two abstains.
Thank you, James. Special meeting minutes from 1/27 approved. Moving on to item 18, entertain a motion to adjourn.
I would move to adjourn the meeting.
Motion by the Honorable James Pelkey to adjourn the meeting.
Second.
Second by Chad. All those in favor say aye.
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 We are adjourned. Thank you all. Have a good
Thank you all,
night.
folks. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Jim.
Jim.